Welcome along to another book review. This time I'm looking at Edgewalkers. You might have seen this advertised on our Hunter Presbytery Facebook group because Rob Patton has added to this book. Bunch of different authors. It was put together by Armin Gakavian, Karina Komrensky, who's our Fresh Expressions person in the New South Wales ACT Synod, and Steve Taylor, who New Zealander but works with the Theological College in Adelaide, I believe, still. So a bunch of different authors thinking about what does it mean to walk on the edges? What does it mean to do things differently? And that encouragement of how are we being as a church and doing differently. Karina, in her chapter, struggles with the old images of evangelism and what that meant, and that uncomfortableness, and the movement that she's made from that, and should she still use the word, and encouragement from some people, particularly a Pacifica person, to maybe we need to hold it with the errors and the struggles and the ways we've done it badly, to help us to think, how do we do it differently? And so to still use the word. There's a bunch of different thinkers. The thing I love, great story about this book in the last week. So last week I was down in Sydney at a couple of training conferences, and Kelly Woods, who wrote an article in this book, was at one presenting one of the things, and she was sort of a bit flustered at the start. She's like, I haven't got my phone, and I was going to read a quote out of a book I put into, and I happened to have this in the bag, and I pulled it out and said, this one? She said, yes! And she was very excited that, I'd just been in the right place with the book. And I was very excited that the person who was talking about digital was now not going to read it off a phone in a digital form, but was going to read it out of a good paper copy. But yes. So Kelly writes on there about the digital world and encourages us, particularly us who are older, who look in and think, this is all strange and bad and wrong, that it's very different for those who've grown up. And maybe we older ones need to change the way we think. And that we need to find spaces to go and be in the digital. She encourages us not to go and set up church as it is outside, but to go and be present and to find those spaces, because people are asking faith questions online. And so are we there present so that we might bump into those people and have those conversations? There's a bunch of different stories from different communities. Particularly there's some from Indigenous background. And so particularly, I think it was Naomi Wolf, was challenging as she talked particularly about coming out of the referendum for the voice. And in the week or two afterwards, she was on a phone call with someone, and a Zoom call, and they were like, so how do you feel after the no? She said, yes. And she said, the other person said, so are the Indigenous people now going to pay for the referendum? And she's like, hang on, this was a government thing. This is, and the other person was like, I recently come to Australia, I shouldn't be having to pay for it. Those challenging things that make us awkward and go, this person actually said to it, there's not really racism anymore, is there? Sometimes we need to read these painful stories for others to help us understand where they might be. There's a few from a Pacifica encouraging us to think about how do we share story. At the training course I was at last week, there were some New Zealander people, and they were talking about that storytelling and sharing. So that's important in there. There's those there's chapters that challenge us about how do we view communion, and is communion just for the very few, or is it part of Jesus' generous eating habits, where he feeds the 5,000 and more, or is it just the 12 in the upper room? There's things that get us thinking about theology. There's things about what might church look differently. How might we do things differently? How might we connect into neighbourhood? So a few people, particularly Christine Palmer, talks about starting church and doing church in a neighbourhood where there is no building, but connecting through playgroups and things like that. some things that some of our churches in the Hunter are exploring. So that might be a great chapter for some of them to read. There's also chapters about reimagining faith. Rod Pattenden gets us to think about how can we play more? How can we, as adults, be more playful and bring play into faith? Because that's such an important thing. Let me encourage you, grab this book. I think Rod's now out of copies, but you can borrow one from someone, find it online. Definitely worth reading. Lots of great thoughts and insights from a bunch of different authors. A number of Uniting churches, some from Baptist, some from other circles. Some artists and things like that. Just help you. Not everyone will connect with you, but a couple or more will get you thinking and going, how might we do this differently? So let me encourage you to grab the book and have a read. And I'll see you again next month for another book review. Bye.